So as we discussed during our previous session, our syllabus is divided into 6 main topics, right? So during our previous session, we discussed about, actually the main topic was the Shramanic tradition, right? So under that specific topic, we discussed about the Shramanic characteristics and the main Shramanic traditions which were prevailed within the in 6th century BCE, right? So our next topic, we have 2 other topics in between, right? So political, economic and social conditions during the time of Buddha and Brahmanic thought during the Buddha, right? So as I told you earlier, for the convenience of understanding, what I do is I'm going to skip those 2 topics, and I'm going to touch the final topic, which is the teachings of 6 religious contemporary teachers during the Buddha. That's because why I did that, because we already discussed about, we briefly discussed about those contemporary teachers and their doctrines very briefly, right? So from today onwards, we are going to start looking at those 6 religious teachers and their doctrines a bit in detail. And we are going to finish that topic in advance, right? Right. So as we discussed earlier, the 6 contemporary teachers during the Buddha, and today we are going to talk about the very first contemporary teacher, who was the Makkali Gosala, and his doctrine was Aarjee tradition, right? So I have divided that the Aarjee tradition into 2 parts, right? So I have sent you the lecture note, which is the first part, right? So you have some other remaining part also. We will be discussing that first part today, and I will send you the remaining part by next week, and which includes the philosophy of the doctrine and like a very summary for the Makkali Gosala and his tradition, right? So we have very easy part here about his doctrine and his early life and all to discuss today, right? So before we are moving to that, we will have a kind of introduction to those 6 contemporary teachers during and the religions which were prevailed during the time of the Buddha, right? Right. So and before that, Hiroko-san, is Mamoru-san coming tonight to the class?
He will join soon. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, till that, we will continue the class. Right. So during the 6th century BCE, these 6 contemporary teachers, they played a vital role by introducing their religions, right? So, or philosophies, right? So, and another important point, by introducing their own philosophies, what happened was it helped to their philosophies. It indirectly helped to develop the Buddhist thought as well. Indirectly, those philosophies helped to develop the Buddhist thought, right? So but these doctrines, or almost all the 6 doctrines, were sharp contrast to the Buddhism. They were sharp contrast to the Buddhism because they did not believe in karma. Almost all the religions, they did not believe in karma. Due to that fact, they were sharp contrast with the doctrine Buddhism, and those doctrines and doctrinal teachers were criticized by the Buddha as well as his followers, Buddha as well as his disciples, right? So we could learn more about these heretical teachers or these contemporary teachers through a specific sutta in the Buddhism, which we call as Samannapala Sutta. Samannapala Sutta in Dighanikaya under the Pali Tripitaka, right? So this specific sutta provides more details about, actually This is the major sutta which provides us more details about these heretical or contemporary teachers and their doctrines. What is that sutta? Samannapala Sutta. Samannapala Sutta. Right. So before we move into the Makkali Putta Gosala, which is our main topic tonight. Right. So before we are going to that, I would like to talk about this Samannapala Sutta. Right. So why Buddha preached Samannapala Sutta, to whom Buddha preached that specific sutta, and when Buddha preached that specific Samannapala Sutta. Right. So let's get to know about the specific sutta in detail before we are moving to the contemporary teachers, right? So at the time by which Buddha preached the Samannapala Sutta, Buddha, along with other 1,250 bhikkhus, Buddha stayed at the Jivaka, the mango grove of Jivaka, which was offered by the Jivaka to the dispensation of Buddhism. Right. So one full moon night, when Buddha was staying that specific Jivakambhavana, King Ajasattu visited Buddha. King Ajasattu visited Buddha. Right. So King Ajasattu is the son of Bimbisara, son of King Bimbisara. Right. So King Ajasattu visited the Buddha, and at that time, during that visit, King Ajasattu presented a question about those 6 heretical teachers. He asked a question from Buddha about those contemporary teachers or contemporary doctrines which were prevailed at that time. Right. So during that time, as a result, as an answer for that specific question, Buddha disclosed very explanatory way, or else we could say Buddha well elucidated about those 6 heretical teachers to the King Ajasatta as an answer for the question which was asked by the King Ajasatta. Buddha well explained about those 6 heretical teachers and their doctrines to King Ajasatta. Right, so that information is comprised within the Samannapala Sutta. That discussion along with the Buddha and with the King Ajasatta is included within the Samannapala, composed within the Samannapala Sutta. Right, so King Ajasattu, within his question, he asked about the 6 heretical teachers who were the Purna Kassapa, Makkali Gosala, Ajita Kambali, Pakuda Kachayana, Sanjay Belatti Putta, and Nigantanatha Putta, or else we could identify him as Mahavira. Right, so King Ajasattu asked about those 6 heretical teachers separately and about their doctrines. Right, so as a result, Buddha gave a detailed explanation about these 6 heretical teachers and their doctrines to the King Ajasatta, and that specific discussion is included within this Samannapala Sutta. Right, so so we could gain more information about those contemporary teachers through the Samannapala Sutta. Right, so that is how the Buddha preached Samannapala Sutta to the King Ajasatta. Right, so when we talk about those 6 heretical teachers, or these 6 heretical contemporary religions which were prevailed during the 6th century BCE, actually they all were rival doctrines for the Buddhism. They all were rival doctrines for the Buddhism. Right, so and almost all these 6 religions provided a negative contribution to the development of karma and rebirth. Right, almost all the teachers and those doctrines did not believe in karma and rebirth. Right, so thus they provided a negative contribution to the karma and rebirth. Right, so due to that fact, almost all the 6 religions were rival religions as to the Buddhism, as they held contradictory beliefs. Right, so the first tradition or the first doctrine we are going to look at is the Aarjee tradition. Right, so we actually went through this tradition very briefly earlier also, right? So who was the teacher of the Aarjee tradition? Makkali Putta Gosala. Makkali Putta Gosala, right? So the Aarjee tradition also, we could identify it as a ancient Indian sect of naked wandering ascetics, right? So, and they purely believed in predeterminism, fatalism, and extreme passivity, right? Predeterminism, fatalism, and extreme passivity, right? So, Ajivakas, they believed that all whatever is happening within this life is predetermined, right? So whatever we do, we could not change our fate, right? So that is their main belief, right? So they basically believed in the predeterminism, right? So during the 6th century BCE, Ajivakas were a popular sect within the India, and it gained a huge popularity, especially within the 6th century BCE. And also, apart from the 6th century BCE, during the King Bindusara, the Myron emperor, the father of King Asoka, hope you can remember. We talked about we have talked about King Asoka and his father during the diploma course, right? So during King Bindusara, he and his wife were great patrons of Ajivakas. He and his wife were great patrons of Ajivakas, and this has been indicated within the Ashoka's rock edicts also, right? So this tradition not only prevalent within the 6th century BC, but also during the Bindusara's reign also, this Ajivaka's tradition was prevalent, right? So and also it is said that Ajivaka's tradition, this specific tradition, was found prior to the Buddhism, right? So it is said that according to the literature reviews and all, Ajivaka's tradition was found prior to the finding the Buddhism, right? So, and once it was found, it thrived, it gained a huge popularity within the India, and later on it was completely disappeared. Right? So at the very beginning of the Shramanic tradition, when we were discussing the characteristics of Shramanic tradition and all, hope you can remember that we discussed that some scholars believe that when we talk about the Shramanic tradition, Jivakas, Buddhism, and Jainism, these three traditions played a vital role, right? So those three were the most prominent and prevalent traditions at that time, and some scholars and philosophers believe that the contents of Ajivaka tradition, due to the fact that it was disappeared, some scholars and philosophers believe that the content of the Ajivaka's tradition was absorbed to the Jainism and Buddhism, right? So, but we could not exactly say that the contents were absorbed to Jainism or Buddhism, but some do believe that. Some do believe in that because the Ajivaka's tradition was completely disappeared throughout the time. By 14th, when it comes to the 14th century BCE, the Ajivaka's tradition was completely disappeared from Indian subcontinent, right? So so even though at the very beginning Ajivaka's tradition was well prevalent within the India, and why it disappeared throughout the time, right? So when we talk about the Ajivaka's tradition, it actually touched the lower caste people like Shudras, Dasas, and Nod, right? So when we talk about the Aranyakas, and when it comes to the Vedic era, The society was divided into several hierarchy levels, and the Brahmins were within the top level, and the lowest level or the was the Shudras, and they were not allowed to embrace any religion. They were not allowed to follow any doctrine, right? Due to that fact, they were very ill treated and they were ignored within the society, right? So during that time, these Shramanic traditions were introduced to the society, and the Ajivakas, right? So it is believed that among the Shramanic traditions, Ajivakas tradition was the first introduced Shramanic tradition, right? So due to the fact, as it was mainly touched the lower class people. The lower class people, it was prevalent and it gained popularity among the lower caste people, Shudras, Dasas, and very lower caste people, right? So due to that fact, it gained a high popularity, right? High popularity among those lower caste people, right? So then why it disappeared throughout the time? What happened was throughout the time, some other religions also introduced, which had the which were talked about the lower caste people, right? So for example, Jainism and Buddhism, they were also touched the lower caste people due to that fact, and the due to that specific fact, and also due to the doctrinal contents. What happened was throughout the time, the Ajivaka tradition was disappeared from the India. Ajivaka's tradition was disappeared from the India, and the other religions such as Buddhism and Jainism became more prevalent within the India, right? So there is a specific cave called Baraba Caves in the state of Bihar in India, right? So that specific cave is identified as it was belonged to the Ajivakas. It was belonged to the Ajivakas, right? So now let's look at how the name was given to this specific tradition. Now it is said that the Ajivaka, the specific name was given to the tradition by its opponents, right? So why the name Ajivaka was given to this tradition? Because mainly they believed in fatalism and predeterminism, right? Fatalism and predeterminism, and they believed that the entire world is governed by a inexorable fact called niyati, right? So nobody can control that niyati, that specific fact, right? So hence people lived very passively without exerting themselves and accepting whatever the life or fate offered to them, right? So they lived life without a life, right? So they just accepted whatever the fate or life given to them, right? Due to that fact, the opponents of this specific religion gave the name as Ajivakas to this tradition. That is why the name Ajivakas was given to this tradition, right? So now let's look at the religious teacher of the Ajivakas tradition, right? So who was the religious teacher? Makkali Gosala, right? So in several texts, he has been identified using several names, right? Makkali Gosala, Mascarin Gosala, Gosala Makkali Putta, right? So he has been identified by using several names, right? So the same teacher, right? So even though they were believed in fatalism and predeterminism, uh, Makaliputta Gosala, the teacher of the Ajivaka tradition, he was a great teacher. He was a great and well-known teacher during the 6th century BCE in India. He was a well-known teacher, great ascetic teacher within India, right? So, and also he was the contemporary to Siddhartha Gautama, the teacher of Buddhism or the founder of Buddhism, and also the Mahavira or Nigantanatha Buddha, Putta, who was the founder of Jainism, right? So the Makkali Putta Gosala, he was a contemporary to the Siddhartha Gautama as well as to the Mahavira, who was the teacher or founder of the Jainism, right? So when we talk about the earlier life of the Makkali Putta Gosala, according to the there is a sutta called Bhagavati Sutta. We will be discussing about the literature information about the Ajivaka's tradition after this topic, right? So Bhagavati Sutta, like now we learned about the Samannapala Sutta of Buddhism, right? So within the Buddhist tradition, through Samannapala Sutta, we could gain the more information about this six contemporary teachers, right? And also we could gain more information apart from the Buddhist tradition. There are some Jain traditions. They could gain more information about these six teachers, right? So the Bhagavati Sutta is belong to Jainism, Jain tradition. Bhagavati Sutta is a specific sutta belong to Jain tradition, right? So through that specific sutta also, we could learn more about these six religious teachers, especially about the Makkali Putta Gosala, right? So according to the Bhagavati Sutta, it has mentioned that it has indicated that Gosala, Makkali Putta Gosala was born in a village called Saravana. Makkali Putta Gosala was born in a village called Saravana, right? So if you take the meaning of Saravana, thicket of reeds, right? So Makkali Putta Gosala's mother was Badda and his father was Mankali. Mother was Badda and father was Mankali, right? So father's occupation, father was an employer, and he was employed as a monk. So monker is a kind of ascetic who occupied with carrying the image of gods or goddess with singing religious songs, right? So his father, his occupation was monker, right? So what do we mean by monker? Monker is a specific job or occupation where they carry gods or goddess with singing religious songs, right? So if we look at the meaning of Gosala, the meaning of the Gosala was Kaushik. Meaning of the Gosala was Kaushik. According to the Bhagavati Sutta of Jain tradition, it has indicated that Makkali Gosala was born in a cowshed. Makkali Putta Gosala was born in a cowshed. That's why he was given the name Gosala, because they were very poor, right? So according to those literature reviews, the Makkali Putta Gosala and his parents were very poor family, and due to that fact, his parents were not they were unable to find more suitable lodgings for in Saravana for his birth, right? So that is why he was born in a cowshed, right? So due to that fact, cowshed Gosala, that specific name was given to Makkali Putta Gosala, right? So, and later on, due to their poverty, Makkali Putta Gosala, he also embraced, or he also went on his father's same occupation and became a monk. Monk is where carrying gods or goddess images with singing the religious songs, right? So and also we could gain more information about the Makkali Putta Gosala from the Buddha Ghosha's commentaries, right? So within the Buddha Ghosha's commentaries, he had mentioned that Makkali Putta Gosala was born into a slavery. He was such a poor person, he and his family, right? So we will be discussing the literature of the Ajivaka tradition in detail after this, right? So, and also Ajivakas could be identified as an organized ascetic sect within the India, and at the during the 6th century BCE, it gained a wide popularity, and especially it touched the low caste people like dasas and shudras and all, right? So the and also bit of this, they believed in the predeterminism and fatalism. Due to that fact, they did nothing. They just embraced whatever the life or fate offered to them, right? So, and they thought that the best way to enjoy the life, the best way to enjoy the life is to accepting whatever the life or their fate giving them without remorse or regret. They accepted whatever the life gave them without a remorse or regret, right? So that is about the religious teacher Makkali Gosala and his early life, right? So the literature. Now let's look at the literature of the literature about the Ajivaka's tradition, right? So I think this part is not included within today's lecture. Yeah. Literature is included in your next lecture now, right? So as we have time, I will be discussing the literature also within today's class, right? So Ajivakas, the simply we could identify them as the followers of life, followers of the way of life, right? So the as I told you earlier, the Makkali Gosala was a contemporary to the Gautama Buddha as well as to the Mahavira. It was the very first Brahmanic tradition which was started within India, and it was lasted up until 14th century BCE, and it was totally disappeared afterward, right? So the when we talk about the literature, we could literature sources, right? So literature sources which talks about the doctrinal facts and the religious teachers facts. We could identify primary sources and secondary sources, primary sources as well as the secondary sources, right? So when it comes to the Ajivaka's traditions, primary sources are its own sources. Primary sources are its own sources. For example, if you take Buddhism, Tripitaka is a primary source, right? So its own source, Buddhism's own source, right? So, but when it comes to the Ajivaka's tradition, we could not exactly find the primary sources or its own texts within the literature, right? So we could say that it was there at the very beginning, but they have completely disappeared and not available now, or probably lost those primary sources, right? So, and it is believed that original Ajivaka's texts were written in a specific language called Eastern Prakrit. Eastern Prakrit is a dialect within the ancient India, right? So Eastern Prakrit is a dialect within the ancient India, and it is believed that by the scholars and the philosophers, they believe that the primary sources or its own texts of the Ajivaka's tradition was written in Eastern Prakrit, but it is not sure, as we could not find its primary sources today. We could not find them, right? So and it is believed that the quotations and adaptations from those primary texts have been inserted to the Jain and Buddhist sources, right? So Jain and Buddhist sources, right? So, and also, as I told you earlier, original scriptures or the original sources are of the Ajivaka's tradition is not available, or not currently available, or probably lost by today, right? So simply when we talk about the Ajivaka's tradition, we could not find the primary sources, right? So we depend upon to learn about the Ajivaka's tradition, we entirely depend upon the secondary sources. We entirely depend upon the secondary sources. Secondary sources are basically the Buddhist sources and Jain sources. Buddhist sources and Jain sources, due to the absence of any direct records about the Gosala, Makkali Buddha Gosala and his tradition, it is actually extremely difficult for us to take a kind of complete and faithful idea about the Gosala and actually his views and practices, right? So because we 100% based upon the secondary sources, right? We take all the information from the secondary sources, right? So when we talk about the secondary sources, we could find several secondary sources, right? So Jainism, through the Jainism, as we talked earlier, Bhagavati Sutta, Jainism, Bhagavati Sutta, right? So it talks about the more details. It provides through Bhagavati Sutta. It provides more details about the Makkali Putta Gosala, his career, and actually I could not indicate this. Makkali Putta Gosala had a strong relationship with Mahavira or Nigantanatha Putta. He spent several years with Mahavira or Nigantanatha Putta. Right. So during our next lecture, we will be discussing his life with the Mahavira or Nigantanatha Putta. Right. So you have keep that in mind. Right. So within the Jain sources, Bhagavati Sutta, it indicates about, it gives more information about the career of the Makkali Putta Gosal and his life or his relationship with the Mahavira or Nigantanatha Putta. Right, so that is the Jain source, which is the Bhagavati Sutta. Right, so when it comes to the book, the second tradition or the second literature source, Buddhist tradition. When it comes to the Buddhist tradition, the main sutta is the Samannapala Sutta, right? Samannapala Sutta. It indicates about the as the Makkali as one of the 6 contemporary teachers or philosophers during the Buddha's days. It indicates about the it talks more about the Makkali Putta Gosala as a contemporary teacher to the Buddha, right? So Jain sources, which is the Bhagavati Sutta, Buddhist source, Samannapala Sutta, and apart from that, there is another Buddhist text called Mekala, right? So it has also included some more information about the Makkali Putta Gosala, and apart from that, Buddha Ghosha's commentary, right? Buddha Ghosha's commentary. Also, within his commentaries, Buddha Ghosha's commentaries also, he has indicated some additional information about the Makkali Putta Gosala's life as well as his teachings, right? So Buddha Ghosa, he was a Buddhist commentary who was there, commentator who was there, who visited the India as well as Sri Lanka. Hope you can remember we discussed about the Buddha Ghosha, right, during your diploma course, right? So he was a great commentator who visited to India as well as Sri Lanka, and he rendered a great service to the Theravada Buddhism, right? So under this Buddha Ghosha's commentary also, he has talked about the Makkali Putta Gosala, his life and his teachings, right? So earlier when we talking about the early life of the Makkali Putta Gosala, we learned that within the Buddha Ghosha's commentaries, he had indicated that the Gosala was born into slavery, right? Gosala was born into slavery. Likewise, Buddha Ghosha was also talked about the Makkali Putta Gosala, right? So simply, when we talk about the literature or scriptures of the Aarjee tradition, primary sources, there may be primary sources. They have existed, but currently they are not existing, and they have lost. right? So the scholars and the philosophers believe that they were there within the India, which was written in a specific language called Prakrit, right? So, but they are not included, they are not available by today, right? So the quotations and adaptations from those primary texts had been directly taken to the Jain and Buddhist sects, right? So when it comes to the secondary resources, from where we could learn more about the Makkali Gosal and his doctrine, or about the Ajivaka's tradition, there are several secondary resources that we could gain more information from, right? So Jain, under the Jain, there is a specific sutta called Bhagavati Sutta. From that Bhagavati Sutta, it talks about the Makkali career of the Makkali Gosala, as well as his relationship with the Mahavira. Makkali Gosala, Mahavira was his one of the contemporary teachers, and he spent several years with the with Mahavira, right? Makkali Gosala and Mahavira. We will be discussing about his relationship with the Mahavira or the Nikantanatha Putta in our next lecture, right? So that is the Jain tradition, the Bhagavati Sutta. And when it comes to the Buddhist tradition, the Samannapala Sutta, right? Samannapala Sutta, not only about the Ajivaka's tradition, but also about almost all the 6 contemporary teachers and their doctrines are included within the Samannapala Sutta, right? So within the Samannapala Sutta, it talks about the Makkali Gosala as one of the 6 contemporary teachers who were there within the Buddha's period, right? So, and also apart from that, there is another Buddhist text called Mekala. Within that specific text also, they have, but we don't have enough information about the Mekala's contents, right? So, and also Buddha Ghosha's commentary. Within Buddha Ghosha's commentary also, he had talked about the additional information and his life, his teachings in detail within this commentary. And apart from that, there are some Tamil texts within India which talks about the Ajivaka's tradition. Apart from that, there were some Tamil texts. Actually, we don't have that enough information. Just remember, there were Tamil texts which talk about the Ajivaka's tradition, right? So today we start discussing about there were 6 contemporary teachers. If I give you a kind of quick summary what we discussed so far, right? So 6 contemporary teachers are there to Buddhism, right? So actually they were actually rival traditions. They all were rival traditions, right? So from where that we could gain more information about all these 6 contemporary teachers from the within the Pali Tripitaka, Digha Nikaya, the Samannapala Sutta, right? So the Samannapala Sutta was preached by the Lord Buddha to King Ajasattu when Buddha along with 1250 other bhikkhus stayed during the Rajagaha Jivaka Ambavana, right? So at that time, King Ajasattu visited Buddha and his followers, and he questioned about the 6 contemporary teachers, right? So as an answer for that specific question, Buddha well elucidated or well explained about those 6 heretical teachers, right? Right. So and we start discussing about the Makkali Gosala, right? So we talked about he was given several names: Makkali Gosala, Masculine Gosala, Gosala Makkali Putta, right? So we discussed about his early life. Mother was Vada and his father was Makkali, right? So he was Gosala. If we take the name Gosala, it is meaning Kaushik because he was born into slavery. That is why here the Gosala, the specific name was given to him, right? So if we talk about the philosophy, about the religion, right? So they believed in fatalism and predeterminism, right? So due to that fact, they did not exerted themselves to do anything, right? So what they do was they, without exerting themselves, they accepted whatever the life or fate offered to them, right? So due to that fact, the opponents of the religion, for this religion, they named the specific doctrine as Ajivakas. Opponents named the doctrine as Ajivakas, right? So then we discussed about the literature sources. Primary sources actually probably lost and not available. We have to learn more about the Ajivakas tradition from the secondary sources. We have several secondary sources when it comes to Buddhist tradition: Samannapala Sutta, Jain tradition, Bhagavati Sutta, and the Buddha Ghosha's commentary. And there are some other Tamil texts which talk about the Ajivakas and the Makkali Putta Gosala. Right, so that is all. I went through your lecture note which I sent you, and I think the literature sources are not included within the lecture note to this lecture note, right? So I have already prepared the next lecture note as well, right? So I will send it within this week. And before finishing up the class, I have some questions. We didn't discuss any questions from the Shramanic tradition, right? So I have 3 questions from the Shramanic tradition for homework, right? So the first one, describe the religious and social changes brought by the Shramanic tradition. Describe the religious and social changes brought by the Shramanic tradition. The second one, name 6 Shramanic traditions which were prevailed in India during 6th century BCE. That is quite direct question, right? So you have to write down the 6 traditions that we discussed so far. Right? The question number 3, discuss attributed characteristics of the Shramanic tradition in detail. Discuss attributed characteristics of Shramanic tradition in detail. Right?
Could you repeat the question once again?
Third one. Which one?
From first one.
Okay. The first question number 1. Describe the religious and social changes brought by the Shramanic tradition. The second one, name 6 Shramanic traditions which were prevailed in India during 6th century BCE. Right? And the third question, discuss attributed characteristics of the Shramanic tradition in detail. Right? Right. So as we went through the lecture note, I'm planning to wind up the class for today, right? So as we are coming to the end of our syllabus, we are not yet finished, but we are coming to the end topics, right? So go through our previous lecture notes and try to study them whenever you have time, right? So, and I'm planning to discuss, I'm planning to finish the syllabus as early as possible and I want to allocate some more time. Actually, I want to take more classes for question discussions, right? So for that sake, you could allocate your time whenever it is possible for you. You could read and go through our previous lecture notes, right? And try to remember the main points, right? Study much as possible, right? So then during our next class also, we will be discussing about the Makkali Gosala and the Aarjee tradition. I think it will be the last part to the Makkali Gosala or the Aarjee tradition, right? So that is all for today, and thank you very much for joining with me. And I'm extremely sorry for the last week. And thank you for tolerating me every time, right? So thank you very much for joining with me, and
Thank you
hoping
very
to see
much.
Thank you
you.
very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Stay
Thank
safe.
you very, yes.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.